We are turning to Lebanon now. Lebanon's Prime Minister Nawaf Salam has made its first visit in months to towns along the Israeli border over the weekend, surveying the damage from years of fighting between Hezbollah and the IDF. Well, Salam is now vowing to expand the state's presence in the south. He's saying that he's going to restore public services, repair roads, water and power lines, and finish the army's mission to disarm Hezbollah south of the Litani River. The visit comes as Lebanon is facing massive reconstruction needs and mounting pressure from international backers like the World Bank and France, who want the government to assert full control and finally replace the decades-long shadow of Hezbollah. Well, joining us now is our senior Middle East correspondent Ariel Osran with more on this. At this point, how realistic is Lebanon's plan to actually fully extend state authority into Hezbollah's traditional strongholds?
Well, look, they don't really have that in the south. I mean, Israeli forces, despite Nawaf Salam announcing on numerous occasions publicly that the Lebanese armed forces have full control over southern Lebanon, except for the areas under Israeli control, that is simply not true, because Israel continues to carry out operations, whether it's targeting Hezbollah operatives that are moving from site to site, trying to rebuild them, or targeting the sites themselves. Some sites have been previously struck. Other sites, these are weapons depots, launch sites. So ultimately, that is not the case, what Salam says. But he is trying to make the case not only domestically, but externally, because the much needed funds that the Lebanese government needs to rebuild the south is conditioned on disarming Hezbollah. So if he says that they're managing to disarm Hezbollah, that is a sign to mainly the Gulf states that Lebanon is ready to receive the funds. But ultimately, it's an uphill battle. The Lebanese armed forces, they are trying, but they're not doing everything. They're not succeeding 100%. It is often Israel that completes that 100%. So do they have effective control? Yes. Do they have real control? No.
What do we know about Hezbollah's strength at this point? Obviously, the ceasefire has been in effect for more than a year now. There are still often strikes from Israel saying that they're targeting Hezbollah infrastructure and personnel, whatever the threat may be. But has Hezbollah been able to rebuild to any extent?
It's trying, and Israel is watching these attempts with a vigilant eye, and more often than not, it is thwarting these attempts. Now, we have to understand, in terms of Hezbollah's infrastructure, they are positions for ground forces, they're observation posts, they're also launch sites. Many of these in southern Lebanon, those that had a direct threat on northern Israeli communities, these have largely been destroyed, mainly all the infrastructure that was needed to carry out any sort of ground invasion into Israel. But in terms of Hezbollah's vast arsenal that at the beginning of the war ranged between 150 and 250,000 rockets, missiles, projectiles, this has largely been destroyed. But a lot of those that remain, we're talking about a few tens of thousands of short-range rockets and artillery. These were housed or hidden in sites far away from the border, in the Bekaa Valley, closer to or further than the Litani River, maybe, perhaps even as far as the Awali River. So Israel has not gone after 100% of Hezbollah's capabilities. It has gone after 80%. If it wants to go after the remaining 20, it can. But I think it is trying to do that in conjunction with the Lebanese armed forces.
All right. Well, stick with us. We're going to be back with you shortly. We're turning to an emotional legal fight that is now underway after one of the deadliest civilian attacks of the war in Israel. 8 families whose children were killed when a Hezbollah rocket hit a soccer field in the Druze town of Majd al-Shams are now suing the terror group. They're demanding accountability in court. The families filed this landmark lawsuit in Jerusalem. They're seeking around $23 million in damages under Israel's terrorism compensation law. Now, you might remember this horrendous July strike in 2024. It killed 12 children and wounded dozens more when a Hezbollah-fired rocket, which was made in Iran, slammed directly into a field where kids were playing. Attorneys say that the rocket was deliberately launched from southern Lebanon, and more lawsuits are expected in the coming days from survivors of the attack. The families say that this case won't bring their children back, but they hope that it sends a very clear message that attacks on civilians will be pursued not only militarily, but legally and relentlessly. Well, Saudi Arabia is pushing back hard on accusations of anti-Semitism, insisting that its recent media blitz against Israel is about politics and not about Jews. A source close to the Saudi royal family tells the Israeli broadcaster Khan that the kingdom wants peace and normalization, but is arguing that Prime Minister Netanyahu is the one who is standing in the way. Now, according to this source, Riyadh's criticism targets Israeli government policy, not religion, and any deal still hinges on the creation of a viable Palestinian state. Well, these comments come as Saudi media ramps up attacks on what it calls the Zionist entity, drawing concern from Jewish groups like the ADL, which warn that some rhetoric has crossed into classic anti-Semitic tropes. And the messaging certainly highlights growing tension between Saudi ambitions for regional peace and the reality of the war and politics on the ground. And joining us now is Hussein Abdul Hussein. He's a research fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. How credible is Saudi Arabia's claim that this criticism is political rather than anti-Semitic? And, where's the line being crossed here, in your opinion?
Well, no, I think it is both. I think there's a mix between what's political and what's anti-Semitic. And, before I came on here, I just shared on social media one of the editorials that lumps the Holocaust, the Jews, Zionism. The editorial suggests that Zionism abuses and exploits the Jews and the Holocaust to be violent, to expand, to settle, to all the bad stuff that the accusations that they level against Zionism. So I don't see that there's any difference between the two, unlike what they're saying. Also, another point, let me just say here that it doesn't make sense for a country to say our problem is with one person or one sovereign of your country. If this happens, this means that Israel can also say, well, we will be happy to sign peace with Saudi Arabia, but only if MBS stops being crown prince and you replace your crown prince. That's not how state to state works. Netanyahu might be in power, might come back to power, might not be in power. The excuses they're giving just don't add up.
I think one of the questions that a lot of Israelis have, and really just the region as a whole, is whether or not Saudi Arabia is genuinely interested in normalizing ties with the state of Israel. Or, is this really just more about repositioning itself regionally and with the United States?
Look, I think for a period of time, the Saudis did have a genuine interest in peace, and that interest sprang out, not out of politics, but out of economics. MBS was trying to transform his country from reliance on oil rent to a services and knowledge economy. And for him to do that, normalization with Israel would have been a great match for his policy. I think over the past few months or probably years, he has probably realized that this is not happening for him, that he's unable to switch or transform the economy. And as such, he's fallen back to the older plan. And in the older plan, you just support some Islamist trends, and you support, or you don't mind anti-Semitism, and you don't mind bashing, Israel, Zionism, the Jews, just lump them all together and bash them together.
Ultimately, what does this tell us about the future of the region and Israel's standing in the Arab world right now?
I don't think it changes much. Listen, Israel has been around for 77, 78 years now, and it hasn't had relations with Saudi Arabia. And I think it can easily live for another 77 or 78 years without having relations with Saudi Arabia. The Saudis have to come to terms with the idea that peace with Israel is a mutual benefit for both countries. That in as much as Israel benefits from peace with the Saudis too will benefit from peace with Israel. I don't think the Saudis are there yet, and they still look at this as if it's a reward that the Saudis are granting to Israel. And as long as this is the thinking, I think the status quo will persist.